Right, so listen, Mauricio's program is entitled Using the Courts to Monetize Our Water Supply. What is really at stake with basin adjudication? How long does it take? How much does it cost? And does anybody really win? So having said that, Mauricio, passing over the podium to you, and there you go.
Thank you, sir. I feel a lot better too after that joke.
Yeah, if you got a better one, you go ahead and say it too. Tell it.
I think I know that Mauricio Mahoney guy. No, but thank you, Shelley and AWA, and to everyone who is present. Yeah, this is a nice full room, great setup, and to all those tuning in virtually, welcome and appreciate the opportunity to present today. And so the premise for today's presentation is based on getting essentially a lot of questions our way, and there's an adjudication that has been filed here in the region, and I feel that I'm certainly qualified to speak to it. In my 27 years of being in the water industry, I've had the opportunity to work in several places that have been having to work through and under adjudicative basins and unadjudicated basins, and have many colleagues throughout the years that have done the same. And the one commonality is when you have to work in or through an adjudicative basin, it's stifling. It's stifling. And the goal here today is hopefully there's some takeaways to, one, really create an awareness of maybe some of the other side that people don't realize or think about when an adjudication is actually filed. And hopefully some creative juices start flowing and perhaps figuring out a way on how to get out of it. So with that, there's the filing, and particularly concerning in the filing is that it's just not a way to capture water rights or to create that control. But I could draw your attention what's particularly concerning in the filing. Again, from these, there's some landowners that along with attorneys that have filed this adjudication, and it's for fixing the water rights for extraction out of the basin, but also the rights to use the storage space in the basin. Now, if that alone doesn't scare you, I don't know what will. So it's just not about controlling what's produced, but controlling what's underground. And we'll get a little more into that detail and some potential scenarios that you'd have to face if they are in fact successful in this endeavor. So let's just start maybe with some of the water facts. So early on, obviously in the 1920s, there was this attempt to manipulate water supply, and that was by some riparian water right users and landowners. And it was held up, in the Supreme Court. However, over time, California said, "Whoa, not so fast, my friend. Having control of this water and just doing whatever you want to do with it, whether it's wasting it, not going necessarily to beneficial use, really isn't what was intended." Because remember, the state owns the water. They hold it in trust for the people to use the water. So you're essentially constantly working through and I guess fighting for the right to use the water that the state owns. So there was another court, an amendment to the California Constitution that said, hey, wait a minute, there's the necessity to have a beneficial use and not waste this resource. And that was upheld in another California Supreme Court that says, hey, it has to be distributed for the beneficial use of others. And by the way, you can't take more than you need. So you can't own and manipulate and monopolize the water supply. And again, remember, the state owns the rights. So what does Fox Canyon GMA have to do with it? Why was this adjudication filed against the Fox Canyon GMA? Well, just to give some background, as I'm sure most of you already know, when Fox Canyon GMA was established in the early 80s, and that was essentially because, look, this area was in overdraft, and we had to do something about it. So the GMA was formed to help manage and improve the health of the groundwater basins that were in that service area. As a matter of fact, through the State Water Resources Control Board, they actually directed United Water Conservation District and the Fox Canyon GMA to come together and develop a good, sound groundwater management plan. And of course, over time, we've been working towards that ever since. One of the incredible outcomes of doing that was the planning and the construction of a lot of major infrastructure that we still rely on today, whether it's surface water pipelines for irrigation, whether it's a well field to provide potable water, and of course the Freeman diversion to offset the water from the river to recharge back in the basin. All really good things coming out of that groundwater management plan. In addition to that, over time, as you know, we've been working through the SIGMA process. SIGMA process said, hey, yeah, we don't want this reaching governmental control over water supply or water planning because one size certainly doesn't fit all. So let's put the control back locally. So you know what's going on locally in your region. You have people that you can collaborate with. And we've been working through that process in SIGMA ever since, even insofar as the Fox Canyon GMA, of course, has submitted a groundwater sustainability plan. It's incorporated several projects to reach that sustainability. We've developed a number of groundwater sustainability agencies very successfully working through their groundwater sustainability plans. And in the makeup of all this, something very incredible is that we regionally have buy-in as far as what groundwater model we can utilize to make these decisions for us, at least help make these decisions for us. A very sophisticated groundwater model that we have not only certified, but buy-in in the region, again, to help us move forward, run scenarios to come up with the best plan possible. So again, today, why are we talking about adjudication? Because folks, we are in a very serious circumstance. Can't take this lightly because just when we've been battling for a number of years now with regulators, with NGOs, with activist organizations and their attorneys that are constantly trying to manipulate and grab our water supply, despite good science, despite monitoring analysis, there's been this constant fight to protect the water resource here in Ventura County. Now we have an internal circumstance that could significantly impact our water supply and the way we operate. And that should be very concerning to you because the operation and all the plans and resources that you have dedicated to get us where we are here and where we're going towards will be for naught. Because the ones who will be controlling your water supply, like the regulators want to, will be attorneys, judges, and a select few that will now be making all the decisions on how you operate and what water will be distributed throughout the region. So, Oxnard, Fox Canyon GMA has submitted the GSPs for the Oxnard and Pleasant Valley basins. And this group of farmers and landowners and attorneys don't like that, don't like the outcome of that GSP. And yet they're unhappy and they want some more influence on the certainty of where this water supply is coming from. And we'll talk a little bit more about that certainty and what that really means, because initially what I'm sure all of you have heard in the beginning, certainly probably those who joined that OPV coalition, was, hey, it's not about more water. This is supposed to be a friendly adjudication to try to hold maybe Fox Canyon GMA accountable, to have some certainty, there's that word again, over where our water supply is coming from and how much it's going to cost. But essentially all that means is when lawyers are getting involved, they're the ones that are determining these outcomes. And we as water managers and the staff we have, we're qualified to do that job. That's why we're here in the first place. The last time I checked, these attorneys, I don't know that they have a distribution certification. I don't think they have a treatment certification. I don't think they have the engineering operational background to make those decisions, but they do make a lot of money in managing other people's water supplies, or at least influencing it. And so I could tell by experience that, especially in this circumstance, when I hear the word friendly adjudication, there's never a friendly adjudication. May start out slow, but at the end of it, everybody's at each other's throats. It costs a lot of money and it costs a lot of time, and you relinquish that control, that public control, governmental control of beneficial use to a select few. And what ends up happening is you no longer have this regional collaboration. You have others essentially monopolizing that resource. And that's where water markets come into play. You saw in the filing, the control of underground water storage. Just think of the problems and the issues that having certain rights to groundwater storage might be for your planning. And so how do we know that it's maybe about, some water marketing, some opportunities to make additional money on having additional water supply? Well, here's a quote from actually one of the lawyers in this case, talking about water markets that can flourish, that they can quantify water rights. So I present this because think about what markets do. And I'm not saying, look, I'm not against people making money, but when some things just don't make sense or seems to have a negative impact, to others, I just can't buy into that. So when there is less of something like unsettlement, say in the Middle East, what does that have? What does that do to your gas prices? They go up, right? There's less. What happens when there's this anomaly when, in Florida, the citrus groves freeze over? The cost of your fruit goes way up. Well, if there's a limited supply of water, and now we don't have a venue or a mechanism to generate either more or reuse what we have, well, now there's a commodity. Now there's something that can be sold at a price that someone else determines. And if you don't have enough in your particular land or your particular service area, then it comes about to be, especially in drought circumstance, how much are you now willing? How desperate are you to pay whatever that market says you should pay? Again, that's just not my opinion. That's in the filing of what they're trying to establish, that water right ownership and that ownership underground. So some other questions I've heard is like, well, Mauricio, if we don't join this, we hear that we don't join this group, we're going to lose any chance for any right to use water if there's some type of judgment or award by a judge. And that's just not true. That's not true. I don't know if that's, again, not in those particular discussions, but it sounds to me like a scare tactic, because it's up to the plaintiffs to actually prove what that, pie of water is going to be. And everyone's going to have an opportunity to file what they believe their water use right is going to be. So in addition, if it does get to that point where an adjudication has been established, the courts always allow for others that may have not been included in the group or had an opportunity to apply. There's some pushed aside for others to actually apply for. And the thing that we have to remember is that when you enter into a water adjudication, folks always have their spreadsheets or their plan or an analysis on how much they believe they own. And it's never that. It's always something less. And anytime you get into dispute of what that is over time, and we'll get into what a water master looks like, you have to go back to the courts. So essentially, the ones who are always involved now in your water management, in your planning, in your operation, are going to be lawyers. That's who's going to make out on this. So here's just, these are actual adjudication processes. And I think early on, maybe in this region, again, under the friendly adjudication, some of the comments were, it's not going to take a whole lot of time. We should get through this relatively quickly. That's not what happens. When you're fighting for a water right, you're going to do everything you can, and however long it takes, it's going to take. And these are some examples of just how long that is. And we've got 10, 11, 17 years to get through a process. Now, we're going to get into some costs, but you can imagine what those costs are as you go along, and especially, maybe right now, not so much in the implementation phase or the preliminary phase, but certainly as you go along, those costs can really start escalating. Just ask the people in Las Posas. So the first time I showed this slide in the very beginning, again, before people started really coming together on this thing, was, it was accused of creating this scorched earth approach. Like, wait a minute, that's not going to happen here. But when you look at the costs associated with these adjudication processes, 25 million, 50 million, $100 million in the Antelope Valley. And I know those people that were involved in that adjudication process. If you look at just what is estimated by the end of this year for the groups that are the coalition that's coming together to try to defend the plaintiff's filing, we're already looking at 5 million, and we're not even in it yet. This is preliminary. So I think it's hardly a scorched earth approach when you look at, we're not even in it really, and we've already spent the tune of $5 million. You start projecting that out, what it'll be here in Ventura County, and the pass through to the residents, the pass through to the constituents are going to be major. Just in this adjudication alone, the more we go along with it, the more pass through, the more rate increases that the residents of Ventura County can experience. So already before an adjudication is even established, the monetization of water has already increased. You're already going to experience an increase. You're going to see that, and certainly in our budget this upcoming year, dollars that could have gone to analysis, to projects, are going to have to go to legal firms, because that's who makes out in this process. So what are the results of an adjudication? And folks, there's a lot more obviously detail that we could go into, but again, the goal is to just realize that there is no friendly adjudication. Realize that it's money that's going to be taken away from the business, from the missions, from the visions of your organizations into the hands of attorneys. And if in fact an adjudication is established here in Ventura County, that's going to supersede all the statutes and common laws that we're used to today. Remember, for the beneficial use of the public, for the beneficial use of agriculture, for M&I, we have governmental codes, we have water codes, we have laws that ensures that this resource is in fact distributed for the beneficial use of others at the most cost-effective way possible. If somebody captures a water market and now those costs now are just astronomical, how is a disadvantaged community going to be able to compete with that? So one of, again, the results is this physical solution, which imposes pumping reductions. So now you have a court, you have attorneys, again, who aren't even from this region, determining what you should use. The appointment of a water master. Say what you will about the Fox County GMA and its governance and maybe some of the decisions or policies that come under some pushback, but remember, we still have this democratic process. The officials on the Fox County GMA are elected officials. They're approachable. As a matter of fact, recently we've been able to accomplish some pretty amazing things by just having that board adopt and amend the GSP to include viable sustainability projects. Fox County has distribute almost like I think $14 million to the Pleasant Valley and Oxnard Basin for projects, implementation, not concept and design, actually construction and moving forward. You have a water master, you go from this democratic process of approachable elected officials to an authoritarian type process where you have one individual or an office making the decisions for you. And if you don't like that, if you don't like what they have to say because they're following that letter of the law, well, then you have to go back to court. And who do you need when you go back to court? Attorneys. It's a continuous legal cycle that never ends. The water master doesn't go away. That adjudicative process continues. Now, it might not be as intense, but you're still going to need all those same attorneys for as long as that adjudication stands. I pointed out earlier the issues of groundwater storage fees and the access to that storage. Imagine this. So we know there are some agencies out there that are planning, say, an injection well groundwater storage project, right? Where they want to take some, say, recycle water, inject it in the ground, hold it there to pump out sometime later, maybe a drought, maybe when the demands are high. Well, if this adjudication process is successful and they have control of that storage, now they have a case against you. Well, if you put that water in there and you're impacting my storage area, well, you owe me a fee. Or maybe I don't allow you to pump that water that's now migrated into my storage arena. So if you want to now have a disagreement or an argument about that to rectify, well, then you've got to go back to the water master. Then you got to go back to the court. And who do you need when you go back to court? The attorneys. So if you're an adjacent landowner and you're extracting water as an overlier, and your neighbor makes a claim that, well, you're impacting his storage capacity under his land. Now, do you have another dispute? See, now, these are potential scenarios, of course, but in that filing of the water rights of your production and then the right to the groundwater storage, those are very possible. I mean, you see how much, the things we argue about today. Can you imagine, is that really far-fetched to argue about if someone feels you're impacting what they feel they have the right to? And so one of the, I think, the major issues, and when I say this adjudication process can stifle the operation or you moving forward, is there's been a lot of work done to procure grant funding, or at least get in the queue for grant funding for some major projects. That ceases when you're in a lawsuit. There's no grant funding distributor that's going to take a risk if there's uncertainty in your region, no matter how great your project looks, because they don't want you to have to return it if something goes wrong. And we all know that these projects are not viable anymore if you don't have assistance from grant funding. And I tell you, in DC, in Sacramento, a lot of work is being pushed towards these infrastructure bills that are going to come to life. And if we're in an adjudication process, we're out of the queue. And all those projects get pushed back and maybe not even actually constructed over time, again, because of the way that adjudication process now has been established and what that right might be. And that's real. Any appropriator will tell you that. So when a court appoints a water master, so again, this is that entity that would take over essentially the elected board of officials of the Fox Canyon GMA. And this is the letter of the law, holding, that court order finite. So if there's any discrepancies, if there's any additional requests or amendments it has to go through that individual or that office. And then again, I can't stress enough, any of those requests will, yes, certainly be reviewed by Water Master and that office, but they'll also be reviewed by the attorneys. And then again, if there's a dispute, you need to go back to court. Again, you need the attorneys. My point is that the funding, rather than going to these groundwater sustainability plans, these projects that are already in motion, now go in the hands of attorneys who are in control of your operation. Because when you get that scenario with a water master, you come up with all the great plans you want, you could come up with all the great ideas you want, and it's not going to matter unless they agree. Water masters don't come cheap. There will be bills and salaries associated with that, and that'll be distributed amongst all of the users. And again, I can't stress the amount of issue that I think arises in this particular circumstance when you're looking at not only having extraction fees now, perhaps you're going to have storage fees. That's for sure. And then who knows what those easement or access issues are going to look like once that's established. So one of the, I think, other unintended consequences that a lot of people fail to realize is that in this adjudication process, once it becomes wide open, there are other people that want to get in that pool. Trust me. We see it day in, day out. Again, I'll mention the regulators, these organizations, environmental organizations, activists, that there's a siege on the water supply on that end. And they're going to look for these opportunities to come in and make a case of why even more reduction of what your water right should be needs to go to something else. And they'll be successful in doing that. There are 3 bills out there right now that are put forth from these conservation leagues, progressive conservation leagues, and trying to get legislators to pass. And if you look at those 3 bills, it's to control the water supply. It's to control rewriting the water right law. Now, imagine if this adjudication is successful. So now you think you have this water right established, which again is less than you think you have. And now they rewrite water law. Now you've got to come back again, pay the attorneys, go back to court and fight for whatever that new water right law states, which could mean you have even less water than you ended up in the first place. These are all there's more, but these are all different types of organizations that now get an opportunity to apply, to comment, and request from the courts what they feel they need, either for the state, for the river, for the public trust. You heard that one before. That's real. And trust me, they're chomping at the bit to get in. We talked about when you speak to the farmers and the attorneys that filed this adjudication, well, they want certainty. And what's nonsensical to me is that we are moving towards certainty. I'm going to show you some examples here in a minute of the things that aren't just planned, that are actually happening, that are actually action items. I think the one thing we know for sure that's certain, if you want to talk about certainty, is the attorneys are going to make a boatload of money, a boatload. And again, I'm not against making money, but when it's nonsensical and at the expense maybe of others, I don't know, it's hard to buy into that. Friendly adjudication. Let me give you an example of what's unfriendly in some of the recent proceedings, you know, in meeting with the attorneys in this OPV coalition. And that is, we really thought it would be a good gesture to move the case out of Santa Barbara because fresh perspective because of the way Las Posas has been going. And when I talk to my colleagues who are involved in Las Posas, let me tell you, managers can no longer talk freely with one another. If you go into a meeting, you can expect 10, 15 lawyers around the table manipulating that narrative of what to do next, what that solution should look like, what the proposals should be. It's not the water managers anymore. We got to be definitely mindful of that. And so we suggested, hey, this is a friendly adjudication. Why don't we move that proceeding from Santa Barbara into maybe LA, where, fresh eyes, and they're used to doing these type of things, especially from the past. And it was no. It was no. And then we said, well, hold on a minute. I think there's a conflict here. I think the presiding judge on this has a conflict of interest because this judge owns property in the very basin that he's supposed to make a judgment on. And guess what the attorney said? Yeah, but I think he's still, they pushed even harder to retain this conflicted out judge. Now, why? Now, if it was about the health of the basin, if it was about making sure everybody has what they need as far as a water supply standpoint, why would they push so hard for this judge that they're already used to, especially when a clear conflict has been presented? Now, fortunately, we prevailed on that. We prevailed. And at the same time, somehow another judge got appointed, but not by the judicial committee, somehow, and had relation with this other judge. And we contested that. And fortunately, we won on that front as well. But so that was hardly friendly to me. It was, to me, about winning, and about winning at all costs. So if it's about winning at all costs, is that truly in the best interest for the beneficial use of the public that we're supposed to be serving, which includes agriculture, which includes M&I, the Navy, and others? That adjudication is going to take money, and it's going to take time. Don't be fooled by that. And of course, we've talked about the several consequences already, especially not just opening the door to the state, to other organizations, to the Wishtoyos and others, but actually rolling out the red carpet for them to sink those teeth right into your water supply. Just so that it's not all doom and gloom on St. Patty's Day, and I encourage you, there's whiskey back there if you guys want to take a shot real quick before we go into the next segment. But seriously, again, I said earlier what just it doesn't make sense to most why this adjudication was filed in the first place, because typically a region has got to have no plan, have nothing really, no collaboration or coordination happening amongst agencies to actually do something about our overdrafted situation. But things are happening. Things have happened. Not only are we complying with Sigma guidelines that the state came back and said, hey, good, we got it. Be more specific about these projects. Fox Canyon GMA adopted some sustainability projects that are already in motion and providing grant funding to get them done. Look at all the incredible work from other organizations that are, building recycled water conveyance to distribute more water. The work that other agencies are doing with desalting and recycled water distribution. Here at United, the Freeman Diversion Improvement Project, that's part of it's done to make sure we could try to get additional diversions of that dirtier water because of what might be available. The work with the Navy in designing and constructing eventually a brackish water treatment plant that will be a constant source of supply from this day forward. All of these things that are actually happening that just aren't concepts. There's action, there's implementation. So if we're moving towards what that certainty of water supply should be, why would that still be an argument in an adjudication form? When we can do this cost effectively, and we've shown, hey, with that grant funding help, that goes away when you're in adjudication lawsuit. Here's what that cost of water is going to be. That's certain. That's something that you will know up front. And optimizing that water supply is another benefit when we do something like this together. So all of these things are in motion, again, to create that certainty for our future, that water supply for our future, for growth, for what we need now to overcome drought. And the cost of water is still very, very reasonable. Why? If, again, it starts questioning what is truly the goal of an adjudication filing if all of these other things are happening. I know sometimes it's about the money. And when it's not about the money, it's about the money. You've seen many of these projects before. Again, this is why people are scratching their heads asking, certainly us all the time, why is there a filing of adjudication when all of these things are underway? When we start off with a sustainable yield, again, through the modeling, through the GSP process, and we've established a goal, and we've already been doing some things to increase that yield. I talked about the Freeman expansion. There's recycled water, the brackish water treatment plant that will be online, not in 30 years, not in 20 years, not in 10 years. Miriam, 6 years? It's going to happen. And we have full cooperation with the United States Navy. The additional state water that's already been brought in just the last few years, you realize over 40,000 acre feet of new water has been brought into this region. That's well above the average we thought of, 6,500. We are surpassing the goal. So why are we adjudicating this basin? When there's a plan, the plan's in motion. If you came to our Water Sustainability Summit, that was a way for legislators to commit to getting the grant funding you need for your projects. So many staff from different agencies and consultants were there to say, we can design and build those projects. We had the regulators there to say, hey, you know what? We're buying into what you guys are doing out here in Ventura County. We're going to help permit your solution. All that goes away, ladies and gentlemen, because some landowners are disgruntled and some attorneys want to adjudicate the entire state of California. So took an opportunity to say, well, why are we here in the first place? When you take on the responsibility of working for a water agency, city, you make a pledge to work for the best interest of your constituents. You're here to make sure that that beneficial use of this resource, which is scarce, is operated, is designed, it's distributed in the most effective way, in the most cost-effective way. And so when you look at the various organizations and just pick out some of their, again, the mission statement is why you're here in the first place, to conserve groundwater, supplemental supply, conservation, combating seawater intrusion, protect, conserve, being sustainable. We're doing just that. We're following that mission right now. I know if you look, when was the last time you saw this region in Ventura County? So many agencies actually coming together to make something happen. If this adjudication continues its process, the monetization of water will go to fund the legal fight, will go to the attorneys, and if people are successful in creating a water market with a scarce source, they control how much you're going to pay for that water. And we know when a monopoly occurs with any type of commodity, those costs can get exorbitant. So That's real, ladies and gentlemen, and we've seen that in so many other places to this day. We need to push back. I encourage any landowner, farmer that's considering to join the plaintiffs to not. Don't be afraid. There's a defense party coalition that has developed that we're ready, but it will be costly. There's going to have to be legal costs unless this adjudication is dropped. And for many, we don't see a reason why it shouldn't be. There's a plan and implementation of projects that will secure our certainty here, will secure the sustainability and reliability here in Ventura County for decades to come. And certainly with that, I'll open up to any questions. Yes, sir.
That was very nice. And I agree with you 1,000% with the attorneys. Couldn't agree with you more. I have a little information on the plaintiffs that filed on one of them. And what got me going on this was the do I have to push it?
No, it's on. It's on.
Okay. What got me going on it was the FCGMA, which is a separate state government agency hijacked by the county of Ventura. And the FCGMA was initially back in 2017 when we filed the adjudication, talking about 24,000 acre feet of water available in the East and West Las Posas Basin, 24,000 acre feet of water. You missed one of the, on your, up there with the 3 water basins. I was in the Martha Wright Goleta Valley for 17 years, from 69 to 86.
I'm sorry.
I have a, well, that was strictly a no growth proposition Goleta Valley up there did in Santa Barbara to, how do you stop growth, take the water away? And that was, went to trial, lost in trial, went to the appellate, lost in appellate, went to the Supreme Court and won. Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying, but when the same no growth issues by the county supervisors was being shoved down our throat with 24,000 acre feet, what would you do? And that's what we did. We filed. Now, phase 1 of the adjudication is done, and they're saying there's 36, maybe 40,000 acre feet. I agree with you. The fighting is mind numbing. And you know, I guess the old story of west of the Mississippi, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. Coming from Chicago, we're sitting on 20% of all the fresh water on earth. As a developer, I have spent millions getting rid of water. Here you're spending millions to try and get a shot glass of water.
That's right.
So yeah, I'm all for, you know, trying to do it, but and the political climate has changed. I mean, this is indisputable. Anybody wants to argue that can argue it, but it's also daylight out. It's not nighttime right now. So yeah, there were political considerations that were being forced on us. The fighting that has taken place and the disagreement, we've always said the argument's going to be with GMA, and the argument's been with everybody else, including Russ McLaughlin and everybody else. Yeah, look, if we could, you know, do like Shakespeare said, kill all the attorneys and go and sit down. I can't believe that valley cannot get together with everybody. There are people that are trying to double dip. There are people that are completely out of control. How would you recommend that everybody sit down and put this together? A lot of it is trust. When the GMA is saying 24,000 acre feet and now they're saying 36, that's a big difference. Now maybe 40.
Well, if I could address that, so very good question. I wish I had the PowerPoint still up because I wanted to go to that water tower slide again. But so I think in the Las Posas circumstance, I think it seems like there was at some point in time, again, not directly involved with it, but there was, you know, certain decision makers that were saying, here's it, right? Despite what the needs were being projected to be from people like yourself. So back in 2017, what you saw here wasn't, well, that's all you get, deal with it. We went in motion. We said, look, we know what might be coming down. We don't want that same adverse effect here in the region where the lawyers are now dictating what our jobs should be, how much we should get. So not only a plan was put together, you see where we used the sophisticated groundwater model to establish a safe yield. And we're saying, but that's not what you're stuck with. We're moving towards what you need.
Do you deny that there was a rush to judgment, that this was being rushed through when we had 20 years to bring the basin into compliance, that the GMA or whoever, the county board or whatever, was saying that we're the first ones to file this with? What was the rush? What was the rush? That was one of the other reasons that we filed it, is to slow down the rush. The information that the county was generating was absolutely totally flawed. Obviously, because they went from 24 to 36, 1,000 acre feet. What was the rush? It was all political. If we can get the lawyers and the politics out of it and do what's best, there's not one single farmer out in that basin that I know of that wants to overdraft that basin and deplete it for water. I don't think there's
if
one.
we could support these projects and working together to create better policy, because I think what you see now with the GMA now
You're
that
muted now. You're muted now.
there's a
You don't
groundwater
want to watch any? Yeah.
Because it's a debate between an outsider and
said you were going to bring in more of that supplemental water, and that would help bring up that sustainable yield. We did that. The Freeman expansion project, so that we're preparing to divert more water. We did that. The recycled water conveyance by the city of Oxnard, they're doing that. All the work from Camarillo, Camarosa, Callegas, Pleasant Valley, they're doing that. So I think that when you have those examples, I think it's hard to be political anymore, because they have to make a decision based on that information.
Exactly. The political acerbic climate has ameliorated and is improving. So now how do we get to where we get rid of the lawyers?
Well, see, that's the difficult part, because as long as you and others who have filed bring the lawyers into the room, we can't have that discussion. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. I feel fortunate up to this point, the water managers, the legislators, the consultants, staff, we've been able to get together like in a really strong forum to develop this plan and implement this plan. And I wish you could go back, and if you roll the tape at some of the last GMA meetings, there's progress there. There really is. I'm not trying to BS anybody. I truly believe there's progress, because one very specific example is that despite what you think about rushing that GSP, they've now amended it to include the very things we're talking about today. To me, that's progress. When you start having conversations about, yeah, maybe the ramp downs aren't necessary because of this, that's progress that you didn't have several years back.
Because the political change in climate.
I think, well, I think it could be a combination of things, but
it won't be that hard.
well, but even if there was a change in political climate, if you didn't have people moving forward with action and getting commitments based on what, the evaluation, the analysis we have today, the projects that are moving forward, then it wouldn't matter who's in the political seat, because you still wouldn't have anything to justify why you need to go in a different direction. Today, we have a very solid, not just foundation, but motion that demonstrates we're going in that direction. It's just not talk. It's just not concept. And I think that's what gets everybody a little squirrely in the beginning, is because there's nothing to show, and then it's difference of opinions. Now we have actual action items that fortify that opinion. But as long as the attorneys are involved, it's going to be harder to have those great conversations that you want to have. And we can have those and create that action to make change and make a difference. But the lawsuit's only going to make things worse. And maybe, maybe there's some people that feel like, well, I didn't get quite what I need, but at least I know what I need. That's going to completely affect what you do from that day forward, rather than continue to work collaboratively at a regional approach, which we emphasize, that will continue to build year after year after year after year. Yes.
I noticed that the Navy was named in the suit. Will bringing the federal government into this draw it out even longer than some of the other suits?
Yeah, I can't speak for the Navy, but I think where you're going with this, anything you get the federal government in, I think certainly can have a chance of drawing that out, because of the levels that they have to go through for either approvals or decision making. And again, that would stifle any opportunity that we have with the Navy in getting the brackish water treatment plant online. And remember that facility is not only for creating additional water supply, it's for cleaning up the basin. It's bringing that seawater intrusion barrier all the way back, and actually opening up wells that haven't been pumped probably in decades, might have the ability to have high quality water for the first time, and again, in decades. But not if we hand over our operation to legal firms. And I would challenge you to talk to anyone involved in any one of those adjudications, whether it's Las Postas or the ones we showed today, how they like it, how they like operating in that environment. Oh, Mr. Lewis.
Good morning, Mauricio.
Morning.
Thank you. Good morning to the AWA, and thank you for hosting this today. And Mauricio, I just want to say you're in a very difficult position. I can respect that. However, it's important the folks here and on Zoom understand that you are receiving one side of the equation. I am part of the plaintiffs groups that Mauricio is referring to. He is not wrong in a lot of what he is saying, but there is a whole nother side to the story in what prompted us to file the litigation. And the gentleman up front in the black hat nailed it on the head. It was about rushing the GSP through, and we as landowners were really trying to work with the GMA, and we worked for over half of a decade with the GMA, urging the GMA to not include an allocation plan embedded within the GSP because Sigma didn't require it. And there's no doubt the lawyers are the ones who come out on top. And it is with great regret that we ultimately had to file the adjudication. However, the GMA's allocation ordinance forced us to do so because of the disruption it caused in our business and the ultimate devaluation of land based on a methodology to allocate water. In a comprehensive allocation plan, there are many levers to pull on. There's a starting point, a ramp down, an ending point, and a replenishment fee. The unfortunate reality is the GMA's allocation plan cherry-picked one lever, left the other three open. We tried for years to negotiate through facilitation, through stakeholder meetings, to gain equity back where it was lost with the initial allocation. It didn't happen. And so once the allocation plan was implemented and the proposal of penalties, surcharges, fines, and levies adopted and now enforced, it left us with no choice but to defend our businesses and defend our land. So to say that the attorneys saw this as an opportunity up on that slide, unfortunately, is not true. We landowners, we business operators made the decision. We, for years, did not want to pull the trigger, but ultimately we had to in the defense of our land and our businesses. And we hope to make it a friendly adjudication. Mauricio, when you talk about the filings for the judge in Santa Barbara, yeah, we dug in and sought to defend Judicial Council's assignment of Judge Enderle, the same judge in Santa Barbara who's overseeing the Las Posas adjudication. And the reasoning was that judge has been on the Las Posas case for years. The Oxnard Plains and Pleasant Valley Basins are the neighbors to Las Posas. So there are very similar issues of law and fact. So for efficiency reasons and to streamline the case is why we wanted that same judge to oversee this case. And while the GMA does pride itself in the fact that it has more than one, I think it's 2 DWR approved GSPs, it has just as many lawsuits as it does approved GSPs. City of Oxnard has filed a lawsuit, our coalition has filed a lawsuit, and Las Posas has filed a lawsuit. So it's not like we're sitting out there on some island and upset with the process. There's a common denominator here. And so what we're looking to do is establish certainty so that a judge or a stipulated judgment amongst us stakeholders can create an equitable plan that really makes us all feel the pain evenly. That's what we're after. And we felt as though the GMA's plan created big winners and big losers. And so we just want to right that. One way to not create a friendly process is to keep telling people publicly that there are no friendly adjudications. There are no friendly adjudications. It's not going to be friendly. That's not our goal. We want to reach out on day one and extend the olive branch to all the stakeholders to get resolution underway. We have a tremendous advantage over the other 15, 17-year adjudications you mentioned, because from the day SGMA was enacted into law in 2015, I believe, 14, we've been meeting as a Ventura County community, united, the cities, PV, GMA, the ag folk, to address the issues, address what we feel we have claims to, get them on the table, and start to achieve resolution. And that's still our goal today. And I want to say that to you, to United, to all the folks in the room. We have very little interest in protracted litigation for everything you just mentioned about the lawyers. I have colleagues and friends in Las Posas, and you're right. You go to a meeting with 10 landowners and there's this many lawyers. And I am one, and I want to avoid them. So your sentiment is not lost on me, but just, I heard the question posed many times today, why was the adjudication filed? Why was adjudication filed? We have a plan in place. But the question still hasn't been answered. Why was the adjudication filed? And it was filed, has nothing to do with the plan being in place, these stats, these numbers. There was an allocation plan forced down our throats that upends our business and really impacts the value of our land. That's why it was filed. And we hope to resolve it very quickly.
And Greg, thank you. And what we're trying to demonstrate today is that goal, though, while noble, is going to cost this region, not just monetarily, but operationally. And that's not to say that we don't understand or appreciate the fact that people have to do business. We promote business. We want developers to be able to have the freedom and flexibility to develop. We want the agricultural community to have what they need to make their farms viable and prosperous, because the world needs you guys. And I think by our example of bringing water in the middle of summer when it was dry and putting them in irrigation pipelines for the beneficial use of agriculture for those businesses is an example of us trying to, make sure that you just don't have what someone's trying to allocate towards you, but demonstrate what could be possible when we work together in doing something so that you can go back and influence the likes of the GMA, whoever else is making that decision. I think there are a lot of folks that still believe that through what we've already been able to accomplish, through what is already in motion, through the progress we've made, we can change that allocation scheme, some of those policy decisions without an adjudicative process. So the goals are similar. Great. Please, I hope no one hears that there's any intention of trying to stifle somebody's business. We are pro-business. That's our mission, to make sure that we do everything we can to meet your needs. And there's examples of that specifically.
How do you explain the GMA proposal that 24,000 acre feet of water in the basin, other than an absolute no growth, kill everything off, political, and now they agree to 36 and possibly.
You know what?
Well, how can you read that any other way?
Sir, I don't know how to.
Change.
I don't know how to read that any other way. What I can read is whatever number that they thought they established. We, along with so many other agencies, water agencies in the Pleasant Valley and Oxnard Plain, have worked together to demonstrate it doesn't have to be that. It's going to be that. And we've already built on that. So that's how we feel we address that. And then you put that in front of an agency in the decision-making process, and they have no choice but to accept that because it's real. It's just not one side of the story or the other side of the story. Again, I think, many times we are maybe talking past one another. We have the same objective.
I agree. We are where we are now. So, and I like your style.
Well, come join our style.
I'm willing to. I'm willing. I think we represent 45% of the basin and the plaintiffs out there. Show us a path. Let's make a deal.
We showed you the path. I say get on your walking shoes, because that's where we're going. And that's what's going to make a difference. But it can't if we have lawyers in the room. I'm sorry, I'm taking probably a whole lot more time, but
It's time.
all right.
Easter Bunny's here.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
You'll be hanging around after.